This happened in November 2 years ago. I was coming back home after staying with my cousin in Rawalpindi for a few days. My train was late by almost 3 hours, so when I reached the Lahore Junction station, it was nearly 2:30 at night. The station was more empty than usual. Normally, even at night, you'd see vendors, workers, or travelers waiting for their trains. But that night, most of the platforms looked deserted except for a few distant figures that kept to themselves. I remember the cold, wet air that lay over the station like a blanket. The overhead lights flickered as though they hadn't been changed in years. There was the sound of dripping water somewhere in the darkness, and every step I took sounded too loud in the stillness. I could hear the rats scurrying along the tracks. I sat down on a metal bench for the connecting train that would come in an hour's time. That's when I noticed a man at the far end of the platform. He was tall in a long black coat, and he just stood there frozen, looking out towards the tracks. At first I figured he was just another late night commuter, but the longer I stared, the weirder it got. He didn't budge. Not a step, not even a shift in weight. Just nothing. I tried to ignore him, but every so often my eyes drifted back. At one point I could have sworn he looked my way, but the shadows hid most of his face, so I couldn't be sure. Something about him didn't seem right. My gut told me to change platforms, so I picked up my bag and walked in the direction of the stairs. As I walked, the sound of footsteps echoed behind me. I stopped, turning to look back over my shoulder. The man in the coat wasn't at the far end anymore. He was much closer now, maybe 20 feet away. And the strange thing was I didn't hear him move. It was as if he'd just appeared there. My heart started racing. I quickened my pace upstairs. I said to myself I was being paranoid, that maybe I was tired. But when I reached the next platform and turned to glance back down, he was at the bottom of the stairs staring up at me. I couldn't make out his eyes, but I could feel them on me. Cold, heavy, like they were pulling me down. I tried to reason myself into calming down, but then I saw something that sent a shiver running up my spine. His shadow wasn't matching the others that were being cast by the flickering lights. Where every post and bench had a clear outline on the floor, his shape emitted nothing. No shadow at all. I flinched, nearly tripping over my own feet. At that exact moment, the quiet of the station was shattered by the sound of a train horn blowing in the distance. Relief washed over me. At least there would be others on the platform when the train arrived. I kept an eye on a man as I moved backward toward the other end of the platform. But then he did something that I will never forget. Without bending his knees or moving in a natural manner, he began to float up the stairs. It was like watching a puppet on strings being pulled by an unseen force. His coat trailed behind him, though there was no wind. My whole body went cold. I attempted to scream, but my voice trapped in my throat. I ran without even knowing where I was running. The station was a maze of empty platforms and waiting rooms, but wherever I went, there he was, standing at the end of a corridor far away, staring at me from the other side of the tracks, popping up on the opposite platform as if rules of distance did not apply to him. By the time the train finally pulled into the station, I was about ready to collapse. The noise, the bright lights, the rush of people, it all felt like rescue. I fought towards the door of the train, grasping my bag in my eagerness to get away. Just as I got in, I made the mistake of turning round. And there he was, standing on the platform right in front of me, his head tilted slightly as if he was watching me. For the first time, the light caught his face. I wish it hadn't. His skin was pale and drawn tight, nearly waxen. His eyes were solid black, bottomless pits that seemed to draw in the dim station lights. And his mouth was curved into a grin that seemed cut onto his face, too wide, too unnatural. The train jolted forward, pulling away from the platform. I never took my eyes off of him until the station was out of view. Only then did I collapse back into my seat, trembling and dripping with sweat. I never told my family what had occurred. I just told them I had a terrible time at the station. For weeks afterwards, I couldn't sleep, and whenever I closed my eyes, I saw that smile. Even to this day, sometimes when I pass through that station, I don't look toward the platforms. Part of me is afraid that if I do, I'll see him again standing. waiting. I don't know what or who he was. A ghost, a shadow, or something far worse. All I do know is that night changed me. I used to laugh at ghost stories. No more. I don't usually talk about this night, but whenever I hear the echo of footsteps in an empty train station, I remember it as if it just happened. My name is Daniel, and I was working in Manchester in 2017. I worked late shifts at a printing press, which meant I typically took the last train home. That night, I was running late, rushing down the cold stairway that opened up into the almost deserted Piccadilly station. It was just past midnight, and the club had that silence you can only get when a place is almost vacant that is normally filled. I remember gazing up at the humming fluorescent lights. They buzzed quietly, illuminating the tile floor that seemed stained and wet. There were some pigeons pecking at trash near the ticket machines. Everything was usual until I noticed a man standing completely still on the other platform. I didn't think anything of it at first. He was wearing a black jacket, his head down, and his hands shoved in his pockets. What unsettled me was that he didn't move at all, not even when the loudspeaker announced train delays. His stance appeared unnatural, as if he was frozen in thought. I shrugged it off, bought my ticket, and headed to my platform. As I walked, I heard something even stranger. My footsteps echoed through the station, but they were not alone. A half-beat later, I heard a second set of footsteps precisely mimicking mine. I spun around looking for someone right behind me, but the walkway was empty. My heart raced, but I assured myself that it was sound bouncing off walls. I sat down on a bench and tried to relax. The board showed that my train was 15 minutes late. That's when I looked again at the far platform. The man had disappeared, or at least that's what I thought until I saw him closer, much closer. He was now standing one platform away from me, still in that same stiff position, head down, hands buried in his coat. There was no sound of movement, no sign of him walking over. He just shifted. The station was chillier. I rubbed my hands together, trying to shake off the feeling of unease, but my eyes kept drifting back to him. There was something about him that pulled at me in a way I can't explain. Then the strangest detail hit me. Even though the dim lights reflected off the tiled floor, his figure cast no shadow. Everything and anything in that station cast dim shadows except him. I attempted to move to leave the platform, but the steps restarted, this time from the stairwell behind me. They were no longer my echo. They were deliberate, slow, heavy. When I looked, the stairwell was empty, but the sound continued, descending step by step until it stopped at the bottom. That was when the man finally moved. His head came up, and although the distance was still between us, I could see his face pale with wide, unblinking eyes that fixed on me. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to move, yet I was pinned to that seat, as though doing so would make everything worse. The sound of my train arriving in the distance should have been welcome relief, but it wasn't. The man stepped forward at exactly the same moment, his feet silent on the concrete. The train screeched into the station doors, sliding open with a metallic groan. I thought for a second about rushing in, but something wasn't right about the carriages. Inside, through the windows, it was dark, too dark, as if the lights weren't working. But I could make out movement. Figures, dozens of them, sitting perfectly still, their heads bowed forward, just like the man on the dais. My chest tightened. I spun around, and he was standing directly in front of me now on my platform. No one could have made it over that fast. His face was expressionless, but his eyes did not blink, did not turn away from me. I stood up to my feet, slowly moving backward towards the stairs, but the doors of the train creaked louder, opening wider than they were meant to, like inviting me in. The heavy footsteps continued to echo from the stairwell. They were not mine, and they were not his. It was as though someone or something was trailing me out of view. My head spun back and forth between the open dark train and the still empty stairwell, despite the approaching footsteps. I knew then that I was trapped between two impossible choices. I hastened my steps, not in the direction of the train, not in the stairs' direction, but straight across the platform. My feet pounded the ground as I ran past the man, and that's when I saw it up close. His skin wasn't skin at all. It was waxy, almost plastic like a mannequin, and his mouth was stretched into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I kept running, forcing myself up the emergency exit ladder at the end of the platform. When I came out on the street above, panting for breath, the night was still. No train sound, no footsteps, nothing. I turned and looked back down the stairway, and in the dim light of the station lamps I saw them. Rows of people standing completely immobile on the platform, all with their heads lowered, all facing the ladder I had climbed up. I did not take the train home that night. I ran the 3 miles of empty streets to my apartment, never once glancing over my shoulder. For weeks afterward, I avoided the station, even if it meant taking buses or going for extended walks. In time, I convinced myself it had been a trick of exhaustion, my mind playing tricks after a long day's work. But 2 months later, late at night, I was woken by a sound that made my heart sink. In the hallway outside my apartment, I heard it again. The same slow, heavy, deliberate step. Slow, echoing, coming closer. I never slept in that apartment again.